loading menu. Hide everything. Outstanding. All right, I think time. Oh,
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Gino Canessa's talk about subscriptions, which I think is going to be really interesting. I was already talking to him about what's going to be new. I'm going to be your host. I'm going to be taking the microphone to you afterwards. Gino, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. And as you mentioned, I'm Gino Canessa. Minutia-wise, first on Whova, we're listed at ending at 5:15, but there's no session after this. It's drinks at 5:30, and that was a mess up, and they're fixing the schedule. So we'll be here, and I'll be around all week if there are more questions. Second, I was a little late uploading my slides. I apologize. So they're probably not in Whova yet. They are at aka.ms/devdays-Gino. They're always there. There's a bunch of years prior there as well, if you're curious. And I did post that link in Whova, so that should be available. There are a lot of links in here if you want to follow along later. And I keep meaning to put a QR code and I keep forgetting. So I'll remember that for next time. So FHIR subscriptions. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe. Let's try that again. Nope. That's interesting. We'll try it this way. Hey, now it works. Outstanding. It's the little things, live presentations, right? So we'll go through quickly. We'll have the obligatory about me slide because it's obligatory. Talk about why we. The panel came back again. Yes, it came over. It was hidden before. There we go. It just keeps coming back. That's the kind of day we're going to have. That's perfect. So we'll talk about why we need subscriptions and then why do we need topic-based subscriptions. We'll go through all the technical bits and pieces and then look at a use case and hopefully take a quick look at the reference stack and then leave some time for questions. Also, if you do have questions, please feel free to interrupt. That's why we're here. So if it's a problem that I'll get to later or something, I'll tell you that I'll get to it later. So about me, that is me. I'm a principal software engineer at Microsoft. I'm actually on the research side. It's fantastic. I get to come and do these types of things and work on reference stacks and specifications. I cannot answer your questions on Azure, so I apologize for that. I've been doing FHIR since 2019, really focused on infrastructure, code generation, tooling, spec development, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. And before that, I was doing DICOM for a couple of decades, where the interop story is those CDs that we're still getting. Apologies, they were a good idea at the time, but we all thought we had 5 years before they were phased out. So contact information, email, Zulip is best, and a link to FHIR educational content I put on YouTube. All right, so FHIR and REST. When we talk about FHIR, that's usually what we're talking about. Most of the times when we access FHIR data, we're using the RESTful API. And that's representational state transfer for people who are not familiar. It's generally based on the HTTP model. So you have a FHIR read interaction. It maps to the HTTP get, delete to delete, create to put or post, depending. But it's client driven and it's stateless and it's cacheable and it's fantastic for all kinds of things. But it does have a problem, the polling problem. If you want to know when something new is there or when something has changed, all you can do is ask and ask and ask and ask and ask and ask. If you want to be nice, you ask less frequently, but then you might go a day or two that you don't know that the thing happened. So that's not good. On the server side, you don't like it either. People keep asking you these questions and all you're doing is running a bunch of expensive queries to tell them, no, nothing new happened. So what we really want is tell me when the data changes. That's what we want. We just want the server to say something new happened. Problem solved. Thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful session. Unfortunately, as I think many of us are technical people, so we know the easier something is to describe, the more painful it will be to implement. So I like to leave this up. It's actually a little out of date. I have to add yet another diamond there on the end. But subscriptions were added all the way back in DSTU2. This was an early identified problem. And at the time, it was just anything changed. And then people said, oh, there's a few different things that we want to deal with. So I won't spend long, but just so people are aware, one of the things that kind of split off is clinical decision support hooks, CDS hooks. And those are for in workflow closed loop things. So kind of the perennial example is a physician wants to prescribe a medication, and that's going and doing drug interactions tests. It's going and checking with the insurance to see if there's alternatives they're supposed to prescribe. All of those things while you're looking at your screen, you do whatever you need to do, and you're back at your screen. So that's CDS hooks, and I believe there are sessions about that if that's what you're looking for. Another that split off is called Firecast, and that one is for real-time context synchronization. So the perennial example for that one is a radiologist sitting at your desk. You have a DICOM viewer, you have an EMR, you have a transcription service, you have all of these different things. And hopefully when you change patients, you're changing in all of them. And so it's context information about what you're doing, and it needs to be real time, and it uses WebSockets, and it's a great project. And I believe there's sessions about that too. And if not, Isaac's here and you can always bother him. So during all this time, subscriptions kind of sat there, and it was kind of the stepchild that was left over. And so in R4, people said, well, why isn't it being adopted? And there were some design issues. So he pushed the big red button and said, let's redesign it. That work went into R5. People said, R5 is too far away. Let's make R4B. We made R4B, and people said, we don't like that either. So then we added R4. So that's why there's a missing diamond there. What was it? And I'll just mention, because we're still building a lot of things on R4 without the topic-based stuff, and it was query-based. So basically a client would say, here's a query, let me know whenever the result set changes. It looks great, but there's some issues, particularly with scale. When you want to talk about a server that has millions of records for thousands of clients, and you're memorizing result sets for all of them individually, potentially multiple, that doesn't scale great. So they said, no, we're not going to implement it. Things like deeply nested chaining that people would ask for all these very complicated and expensive queries that you had to run all the time. At the end of the day, it was just hit or miss for your use cases. So the redesign said topic-based. We didn't invent it, we stole it. So web sub, pub sub, all these types of things we're all familiar with. Why would we reinvent this? It's a well-known pattern, let's use it. Get reusable topics across systems. You can base them on resource changes, interactions, events, all those types of things. But servers can choose which ones they were going to support and optimize for them. And then we get back to our golden standard of server-driven workflows. Logically, we broke this up into 3 parts. So we have a topic, a subscription, and a notification. And we'll dive into each one here in a minute. But just, it'll make more sense if I preface by saying, the topic is the thing that defines what's triggering a notification, all that stuff. The subscription is, hey, I'm a client and I want to be notified. And the notification is here's what you get. So in R5, as we said in the story, we got to do everything, all the changes we wanted. So we made a new subscription topic resource, nice and shiny. We modified the subscription resource to support all these things. And for the notifications, we got to add a new type of bundle and add a new subscription status resource. And that has all the information you need to route notifications and all of the event focus and all this stuff. Great, fantastic. But as we said, we also need it backwards. So we have now a guide that works in R4 and R4B, and it's using extensions and alternatives to try and get functional equivalence with R5. We can't get it identical because we can't change resources. So what does that mean? In R4B, we got to add resources. We couldn't change them, but we could add them. So we have a new subscription topic resource. We have the new subscription status resource, but we have a profile on subscriptions with a bunch of extensions. We also have to use the history bundle format because we couldn't add a new bundle type. In R4, we said, do we really need subscription topic? The reality is most people are defining these in IGs, especially in national level IGs, things like that. So what you need is the canonical URL. You don't need the full executable definition because most people aren't using that anyway. So we said, we're going to leave that out of scope, still have the profile on subscriptions. And then with the history bundle, we have a profile on parameters for all the notifications. I will note that there is, Graham has been pushing for a basic wrapped version using cross-version extensions. Oh, Graham didn't push for. He's in the back of the room. But you created it, yes. Okay, Graham created a basic wrapped version using all the cross-version extensions. We do support it in the reference stack, so it's there. It's ugly. I don't know a better way to say that. Definitely, even if you want to do everything in R4, and even if you want to support that, author everything in R5 and then have tooling port it. You don't want to use it directly. We can look at why. So what is a subscription topic? It's a canonical resource. So a lot of people call those definitional or knowledge-based resources, things like that. It's not something that's per patient or even per server. This is something that's ideally shared across everything. So they're in implementation guides, they're in the registry, they might be in a FHIR library. We want to define them, derive from them if we need changes, and then reference them by those canonical URLs. The most important thing, what describes the notification? And the most important thing there, human readable text. We want to be very clear on what this notification is. We have a bunch of computable ways of describing it. So we have resource changes, we have interactions, we have filters, we have FHIR path, we have query, all these great ways. But inside a FHIR server, sometimes it's a pure FHIR server, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have a database here, sometimes you don't. We don't know. So the key is when you're going to implement the topic, that you are doing what the topic says. So all of the definitional computational things are great on a generic server, but in production, we expect all these to be hand-coded anyway. So that's what you get. It does define allowed filters. So this was one of the issues that people had with the old versions, is saying, yes, I'm looking for notifications on patients who have been prescribed this medication and had this condition in the last 3 years. And no, you can't do any of that. Here we say in the topic, here are the filters you're allowed. You can take them or leave them. And the last thing is defining the shape. So these are additional resources that might be included, are typically useful. So same thing if we're talking about encounters, it's typically pretty useful to include the patient. Might be useful to include the provider, service provider, location. It's going to depend, but it's very important to note they may be included. They may or may not exist. You may or may not have permission for them, et cetera, et cetera. So clients should be functioning without them, but it's a good hint for both sides to say, here's the kind of stuff you need. So a couple of examples. Patient admission, it's one we've been talking about a lot. It's on the encounter resource. We're looking for when they're in progress. We might filter on patient ID or group membership, things like that, and include patients, practitioner, location, whatever. Another example, explanation of benefit. Generally, if you're doing that, you want a new EOB. So anytime they're created, and you'll have a different set of filters. Patient ID group membership is still good, but maybe facility, provider, payee, et cetera. As I said, there's a lot of these computational kind of executable definitions. So for instance, in this case, a resource trigger, it's saying on the encounter resource, we have some FHIR path criteria. So we're looking for either a previous state that didn't exist or a previous state that just wasn't in progress. and now the current state is in progress. So anytime a resource is created or updated, you run that FHIR path criteria check, and it'll tell you if this triggers or not. The equivalent thing in query criteria, previous has a status of not in progress, current is status of in progress. In this case, we want both of these things to be true, but during a create, we can't actually evaluate it, so we say it automatically passes. For all the people out there who are more a fan of events, particular event systems that may have been published for a long time now, we can also say this beginning of a clinical encounter happens to be the same as a V2 ADT A01. These are published catalogs for people who have been using V2 systems. They already have all these bindings in place. And now we can say we have the same notification from a new FHIR server doing everything in FHIR, and from a legacy system that was doing V2 messaging. And we know how to map them. We know it's still going to be based on the encounter resource, and they're using the same URL for the topic definition. In this case, just showing an example filter. It's pretty boring. It's the patient. So on encounter, there's a search parameter called patient, and we're just using that. And then finally for the shape, things that we might want to include. These are just using the include and rev include syntax from FHIR search. So in this case, we're saying from the encounter, the patient or the practitioner or the service provider or the account or the location, and we'll just list those things that you might get. All right. Now we have a topic. Now we need a subscription. So the topic's just sitting there. The server says I've implemented it, and we want to actually get notifications. That's what we're all here for. So we make a regular resource, a domain resource. And this has, for instance, your endpoint information. You can tell it where you want to get these notifications, URL, email address, etc. You need format information, MIME types, how much information to include, and the actual filters. So I don't just want to filter on patient. I want me. I'm a patient, and I want my patient ID to be the filter. The method of communication. So this is channel types. This sounds fancy. Really, almost every single person only wants REST hook. That's the most common by a lot. That said, there are some situations like email, especially for public health entities that don't have FHIR servers. If you want to be able to still send them a notification that something happened, they probably have an email address. So it's a pretty low bar. That's the goal. We also defined WebSocket and FHIR messaging. So those are all predefined channel types, but we made it extensible. That was something else that was missing in the earlier versions. So you can create your own. For instance, a message queue. I'm sure no one here uses message queues for anything, but if you wanted to, you could put one in here. I have an example one that sends notifications on Zulip, or if you're in a cloud hosted environment, you can use whatever the cloud host event system is. Every provider has their own. And yes, even fax, not to pick on Graham, but you defined fax. Yeah, I know. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. So what do you send? We do have one more thing here, the payload type. And that's how much information is going to be contained in the resource. And this gets tied up into a whole lot of things about jurisdictions and security and agreements and what you need to do when, workflows and et cetera. So we define 3 levels of information you can send. The first one, the least, is the ping. So essentially you say, something happened on this subscription, good luck. Client can come back, issue queries. We have some operations to find help, all these things, but they have to re-authenticate, query the system, and do it. Next level, ID only. Something happened on the subscription, and it involves encounter 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Patient A, etc. Now you don't have to search. You're just coming and saying, fetch me these resources, but the client's still reauthorized, and we still didn't send any PHI in the notification. And the bus down here, full resource. Just send me everything. We're using PIN certificates with mutual TLS and business associates and whatever. And I don't care, just send me the resources so I never have to talk to you again. Changing the view from vertical to horizontal here to just drive home the comparison. When we do the ping, we get the subscription ID. The client has to query the server and retrieve the data. In the ID only, we have the subscription ID and the IDs of the resources. So we just retrieve the data. And in full resource, we have the actual resources. So you're picking that when you ask for the subscription and you're negotiating that with the server on what they're going to honor. So for instance, they might say, if you're doing an HTTP endpoint, all you get is ping. And if you have HTTPS, you can get IDs. Great. So some examples of subscriptions, again, just to match our pattern. If I'm doing the patient admission as a consumer, I'm doing a REST hook to a URL endpoint. Likely that's converting that to a push notification for my phone. It's from myawesomehealthapp.com or whatever. It's going to be a single patient filter because I'm looking for notifications about me. I want ID only. I kind of like myawesomehealthapp.com, but I'm kind of hesitant. I don't really want them having all the resources all the time. Just send them IDs and I'll deal with it later. And then I'm going to specify FHIR JSON because I'm a modern person who likes JSON. And I think we can all agree we don't need XML. Moving on quickly. Another example, medication dispense, just to show a different type of use case. This would be a practitioner in a facility that's going to connect via WebSocket. So the notifications are coming to their browser app that they have. Might filter on location so that you're saying this is the ward I'm interested in for today, and send me the full resources so that I can actually take action on them. Still want FHIR JSON though. And then same thing, just breaking it out into some of the actual elements, the same data. And then we get to the notifications, the third part here. So all the notifications are FHIR bundle, and they're going to be either a history bundle, if you're an R4 or R4B, or a subscription notification in R5. See, shiny new bundle types. We'll have status information. Same thing. If you're an R4 and R4B, or no, if you're an R4, you'll have a parameters. In R4B or R5, you'll have a subscription status. Either way, it will be at entry 0 in the bundle. So the first thing, you'll have payload. It's going to be by configuration. If you're empty, that's it. You get your status information and you're done. If not, you might have the full resources, etc. And this is just showing kind of the example with the FHIR elements again. You know, we have an event notification that has one event focused on the encounter that is happening. And there's the additional context of me, and the location is where it happened. So now we have all the kind of technical details done. I did want to make one sidetrack here to talk about some architectural notes. This is all designed to be a horizontal infrastructure piece and let you implement it the way that's best in your server. Performance and scalability are critical, and that's going to vary depending on how your server exists. So this is a non-exhaustive list of considerations that we had just to show that you can do all of these. The first one is the all-in-one system, right? I have my one system. It contains all my logic to trigger notifications. It can send in all the desired protocols that I want. When someone asks for a new message queue, I just add it to my server and everything works, and it's all in one nicely wrapped package. Perfect. The system will let you do that. Second one we have is a protocol relay. Your server or system contains all the logic you need to trigger everything, but you're only using the message queue you use or the cloud provider event system you use. You're just doing one type of notification that you're sending, and you send it to another system that's going to change it into a REST hook, that's going to change it into an email, that's going to do whatever else. Great. If that's what works best for you, that is allowed. The third one here is a logic server. So this is another type of architecture that's come up quite a few times. Essentially, the main system just sends out every single change that happens. I don't care. I'm sending it to another server for processing. And then that server is going to apply the logic, figure out where the subscriptions go, and either send them or relay them to another system to send. Perfect. All of those and many more, they're all allowed. If you come up with an architecture that you really need and it's not supported, please let us know. We'll get feedback. It should be. So the goal is not to be prescriptive on how you implement your server. It's just to define all these pieces so that we can all interop when you do. So I do want to dive through one quick use case here. And I picked care team notifications as one that's something we all kind of struggle with, I think. The short version is we need to know what care is and is not happening for a patient, right? That's what a care team wants. We're back to the REST polling problem, right? We need to ask different systems when things are happening, when things are not happening. But it's worse. First off, now we're not just one client asking one server. We have a lot of organizations. So as a provider, you might have to ask 6 different organizations, hey, have you seen this patient? How about now? It very quickly becomes unmanageable. And it's also worse because, and this is tiny text, I apologize, but actual people are involved, right? Some systems will poll for you and let you know and things like that. Other times, it's the calendar, right? I'm going to send you over to see a specialist, and I'm going to add to my calendar to follow up with you a week from now. Hopefully you've been in, hopefully you've seen them. Maybe you tell me it's rescheduled for 2 weeks out. Maybe you missed the appointment. I don't know. But now we're wasting people's time, and that's not good. So what can we build? Well, we can build some topics. We can build topics to drive workflow. These could all be under one umbrella topic because you can put a lot of different triggers in one thing on different resources, or they could be individual topics for interested parties so they just implement the pieces they need. Some examples, a patient needs a service, a patient scheduled, completed, missed an appointment, there's a new lab, a new prescription, a new observation. All these different triggers can be put in centered on one patient. Then we can send the notifications to the care team, right? And the idea is that these can show up in their work queues. They can be attached to patient records. They can show up in smart apps. If a provider or a service provider, especially when you start talking about outside of clinical care, traditional clinical care, if you want to work with an HVAC system because someone has allergies that need to be taken care of, they don't have a FHIR server. So, okay, we can give them an app that can still get these notifications, that can still send these notifications. So those are important things. And that leads us to some good outcomes, right? We can improve care. There's less of a chance of someone missing data, right? You're not sitting there saying you didn't know that this other appointment happened. You didn't know that this new prescription or medication has been prescribed. You're not missing those pieces. People also know about events sooner, right? If you are asking someone to go get a service because they are in, a social determinants of health type of scenario that they need food security or housing security, and they're missing appointments because of external factors, the sooner you can find out, the much better the outcome's going to be. The longer that you miss, you wait for them to come back 6 months later, we've missed 6 months of very important care. Cross-organizational updates happen. You get better views. A lot of people have figured this out internally, as long as you're staying in one hospital or one system. But once you leave those boundaries, it gets a lot harder. So this standardizes those pieces and everyone can get the same view. We reduce burden. We're getting notifications to us, so we're not having to worry about following up ourselves and remembering to do so and all those things. So yeah, information, faster, more reliable. That's what we want. So with that said, if you want to develop, test, play, we do have a reference implementation. It's a new one. It is an open source reference implementation. It's on GitHub. It's an in-memory FHIR server with a UI. There's also a hosted version on subscriptions.argo.run, and you can install it yourself on your local system as a .NET tool. And we'll see if this lets me pull this up. Maybe. Hey, is that my screen? I can't even see. Let's do this. That should force it. It does not. Where is that screen? Hey, it's up here. Oh, this will be interesting. Okay. Try and do this. Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn slightly this way so I can actually see the screen though. And I'll make it bigger too. So this is the reference implementation that's out. I'm running it locally instead of on the subscription server just because. It does have R4, R4B, and R5 endpoints. Everything's there. It's most of a full FHIR server. It's not fully there yet. It's still technically pre-release because I'm not happy with it yet. But you can look at FHIR contents, local subscriptions, and all that stuff. It has some locked resources, so a patient and a topic that can't be broken, so that they're always there. And there's a tour of the whole system. So this walks you through step by step, saying, you know, you need to pick a topic. Once you've picked a topic, you need to configure a subscription. Most of these are locked options because we're going through the walkthrough. So we can't change the endpoint because it needs to be an endpoint it knows about so that it works, all those kinds of things. Pick your filter data. Again, we're only filtering on the patient. Post our subscription. And then we can see, you know, there we go. We can actually go, this is the FHIR URL if you wanted to just do a get, or we can open this. If I can get past that, there you go, and see the subscription resource that we posted. And we can actually see that in JSON or XML. I did add that, you're welcome. But that's all there, and we can keep going through and doing all those things. So as we post, like there's the handshake bundle, same thing. We can go and take a look at what the handshake bundle looks like. And we can see that there's a bundle. It's a subscription notification because this is an R5 bundle. And there's a subscription status resource that was a handshake, and it was telling us that here's the subscription and topic, etc. So you can go through the tour and play with everything. Again, it's live on subscriptions.argo.run, or you can install the .NET tool and go through everything on your local system. And that's for all of them, for all of the versions. And now this doesn't come back. Hey. There we go. Awesome. So with that, like I said, there are a bunch of links in this deck. So there's the link to the decks. There's the Zulip subscription stream. There's the backport IG. There's the resource links that we use throughout all this, broken up by FHIR release version. And then there's the info on the reference implementation, both the running version that's hosted and where the source code is. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Regarding the package sensor trend, how about real-world uptake or adoption? Which systems are currently supporting which version of subscriptions?
So the question is, which production systems are supporting which versions? And I don't know that I am at liberty to say anyone. Most of the people I know are in roadmap. And so we talk with people, we help them through implementations, but I can't commit to when their products are until they're public. And I don't know if anyone has public full implementations yet. So this is still on the newer side. You know, there's the order we did things in was getting everything done for R5, and then we did the backport. So, and then we backported to R4B at first, and now we backported to R4. So it's coming, especially US regulatory bodies are very interested in prescribing this. So it's coming relatively soon, but yeah, I can't think of publicly available production systems yet. Any other questions?
Thanks for the presentation. So, so a question about these subscription topics.
Yes.
So you mentioned that these are like canonical resources, or those are like, you know, considered like knowledge resources, basically.
Yes.
And so I guess the question is, I thought there could be a wide variety of these subscription topics.
Yes.
But from your presentation, it seems that, you feel, the understanding is that, there could be maybe, I don't know, tens of topics that can be predefined. And maybe there is, there obviously people can define like, implementation guides and, extensions and things like that. But it seems that, the feeling is that, there are maybe tens of topics that are enough for most use cases. Is my understanding correct?
Not completely. There's kind of two sides of that coin. From the interoperability story, that's probably more common. So when you talk about in a national context, most likely most vendors are going to implement what's regulated, and those will be, in the tens of topics, and that's it. Like the reference implementation, you can post whatever topic you like. It'll use the FHIR path definition or the query definition, and it'll try to execute it. That's very common in pure FHIR servers. So like I know Happy is working on their implementation. This one's here. Graham's server, I don't know how far along or when he's planning to, not yet. Yeah, eventually. But all of these types of servers will likely be whatever you want to post. When you go and actually implement this in a facility context, I assume that they will have their own sets. Again, most people don't want to just say do anything. But if you're working in, a cancer reporting scenario, well, you'll probably define the cancer reporting ones you need, and servers will implement those, and that's it. But each of those contexts will likely have kind of fixed sets that they want. No, please. Yes.
So can the client define a subscription topic?
If the server lets it. So in the reference implementation, yes, you can. When you talk to a large EHR vendor, the likelihood that they're going to allow clients to just define their own topics is pretty small. And so that's why I'm trying to, not tout things that aren't likely to be existing. So for development, for testing, for building them, yes, you can do anything you want all the time. There will be some servers that let you do anything all the time. But most production systems are going to be hand implementing things specific to, they might open up things like saying, well, here's our existing V2 catalog. So any topic that is equivalent to one of those events, you can do anytime you want. Great. That's already a huge win, and we can work more towards more custom things later.
It's probably more about enterprise information systems versus data repositories. Production data repositories probably let you define whatever topics you want because that's what they're about. Whereas
Yes.
enterprise information systems, don't think so.
Yeah.
Gino, you mentioned regulation in the US.
Yes.
Interested in subscriptions. Can you talk to that?
I think that's about the extent of what I can say. I know that they are interested in it. Brett can say more. Brett's the perfect person to ask. I'm going to defer this to Brett.
I'm not going to say anything. So in the US, we had a kind of proposed rule come out, I guess a month and a half back, and in there they had a formal request for information in around subscriptions and about support and what they should do next. And so we'll see when that final rule drops later this year what they decide to do.
Yes, that's HTI 1, I believe. Yes, and it has a few pages on subscriptions. I did forget that was there. So
I'll say a little bit more. There's a tremendous interest in the public health side of the US in getting subscriptions working. That's not the same as we're going to do it, but it's certainly driving interest. Some of you may have seen I did some preparatory work at the spec level in case it comes up, but it's very much in case. Early days, who knows how it's going to play out when.
yes. I will add one more note on that though, and that is to say that most of the vendors that I've talked to are very excited to have one infrastructure layer to handle the different use cases. Obviously, lots of customers have lots of things that need pieces of this. And if they can push them to one standard way of doing it, they're much happier than custom implementing the same thing over and over again for every single customer. So there are a lot of vendors that are interested, but same thing. I'm just a cog in a wheel and can't report publicly what people are doing.
I really like the insight that you could actually implement subscriptions on legacy non-FHIR servers.
Yes.
And there is some example code in how to do that. Are you aware of any kind of supported code if there would be an organization who would prefer to have some kind of a supportive package instead of building their own or hire a consultant to do something tailored for them?
Not yet. I know that we've been building a lot of those things as proof of concepts to say, for instance, if I have an HL7 receiving system, can I just translate that into the equivalent FHIR? We've played with a lot of those things, but so far, again, not in production or anything like that. But I expect that to happen because I know a lot of vendors in particular, when asked about subscriptions, they're saying, I already have a V2 solution. Why would I reinvest my developer energy into building a FHIR solution? And the answer is, you don't. You just need a little translation layer and you're good to go. And so we tried to make this very flexible at the infrastructure level so that hopefully we can get everyone on board.
Yeah, I second that. I see a need for that kind of tools. Thanks.
Yes. An important note there too, while we've done all these with FHIR, you can do completely external things because these systems can be anything you want. So like one I'm putting in the reference stack is button pushed event, which is to say the user pushed a button and you can link things to, shift change or, patient was dropped off by transportation company or whatever. So you can build out these events and do whatever you need as you're doing it. Again, it comes back to what will people actually support in production. And the more use cases we build out, then the better that production support will be.
Any other questions?
Up here in the front row.
You said one of the main goal is to save the resources you have on a server and the speed, but it's actually a good framework to share data with partners. Was it also a goal of inventing subscriptions?
Yes, there was definitely the use case that was put forward of saying, I need to replicate a full server. I want to be sending in the US, there's the whole insurance payer and things like that. So there were a lot of those types of use cases that came forward to say, yeah, I just want to be sending anytime one from, every one of my patients will have one of 3 insurance providers, and I want to be sending them information as it happens. Perfect. That's there. And the topics do let you do things like delete. That was missing from the earlier set. So if there's something gets flagged as entered an error or a patient record gets deleted, things like that, you can also base notifications on that. So you can really build out a full replication server if you want. Sky's the limit, hopefully. I'm sure there are things we missed, and there's obviously room to keep growing. So the more experience we get, the more we can bring back and improve and keep taking our bites at the apple. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the security on the subscriptions?
Yes, very little bit. Now, we do have, it's an ongoing battle. Obviously, normally when we talk about security and FHIR, we're talking about a client that's authorized, typically via smart, and we have our token and everyone's happy because it's a short-lived token and the client can prove it was them. When we start doing subscriptions, now we have a third party, theoretically the same party, but it's a different system. It's a long-lived thing, and it can be problematic. There are different mitigations we've been playing with, things like the subscription resource now has just a generic place for parameters, so you can pass through all kinds of things like fixed tokens or public keys or different things like that. We've looked at defining channels that enforce additional security. But one of the most common things when people are trying to sort through security comes back to sending empty notifications and making the client reauth or even ID only. And that way we're not sending PHI. Yes, someone knows that something happened, but to actually see the resource, you have to come back to the FHIR server, authenticate and retrieve the resource. And so that's kind of the stopgap measure in the interim. On the full resource side, it's definitely trusted connections. So if you're saying it has to be someone that I have, mutual TLS prearranged with, perfect. You can filter that when you're creating the subscription and not allow the other ones. We've looked at smart backend authorization, backend services authorization, I think it's called now, and some of these things. And right now they're just additional parameters to pass. Hopefully people will define IGs to do them, and hopefully those people aren't me. But if I need to, I will. But yeah, so those are the kind of the short-term and long-term stories are keep expanding channels and make sure that we can do better security in them.
Okay, time is up. I think for
Wonderful.
questions. I hope they can find you.
Yes, I'm here all week.
All around for more questions. There are some questions also to Q&A. Check
I
them out.
will take a peek at the online ones. Apologies that we didn't get to those.
That's
And
okay. Thank you very much.
thank you. And yeah, please feel free anytime. Lovely.